"How are you people?" Gathered in front of a eunuch's house. A eunuch came to the door and said, "Look, we don't have any complaint against you, but hand over the girl who insulted the Prophet and is hiding in your house to us." One person from the crowd openly declared, "Look, we don't want any chaos here. You are pious and religious people. It would be better if you hand her over without any force or trouble." The eunuch added, "We are not troublemakers. We are from the Tablighi Jamaat. We also don't want any disturbance here. If she comes with us quietly, there will be no reason for us to harm her," replied an imam standing in the crowd to the eunuch. Inside the house, the Prophet's girl sat with the eunuch. The eunuch encouraged her, "Rasul, the time has come. Now is the time to tell them who you are. Rest assured, Allah will not let anything happen to you. Allah has sent you for our cause. That is why this time He has transformed you from a man into a woman. We hope that you understand our feelings and the essence of being a woman. Now is the time to tell the world who you are and reveal the truth." After a few moments, the Prophet's girl got up and walked toward the door where the crowd of men was waiting for her. The same religious man who had earlier tried to force himself on her on the roadside called out, "Come, Aisha, come and tell us who you are. I believe in you." The Prophet's girl, feeling overwhelmed and anxious, slowly began to walk toward the crowd. "Look, I no longer have prophethood to invite you to Islam, but the Islam that the Prophet brought 1,500 years ago is not this Islam," she began to say. As soon as she said this, a man in the crowd shoved her. The Prophet's girl staggered and tried to regain her balance, but she failed and fell onto the imam. Her headscarf fell to one side, and her hair flowed freely in the wind. The imam did not even look at her but grabbed her hair forcefully. The Prophet's girl cried out in pain. The imam started dragging her by her hair across the road while the crowd chanted in unison, "The only punishment for insulting the Prophet is beheading, beheading." The religious man who had been smiling at the Prophet's girl was right behind her, still grinning. Tears streamed down her face from the excruciating pain, dripping onto her blessed cheeks and lips. People around were chanting loudly, filled with emotion, while those closest to her kicked her stomach and face. After walking some distance, the crowd stopped in a deserted alley. "Let's burn this girl right here," someone in the crowd suggested. "Is killing her the solution? She has committed a grave insult to religion and the Prophet," the religious man offered his opinion in response. "She deserves to die in such a way that it becomes a lesson for everyone," an old man in the crowd remarked. "All right then, strip this girl of her clothes," the imam openly commanded. Hearing this, the crowd went wild, scrambling over one another to tear at the Prophet's girl's body. Each person was eager to tear off even a small piece of her clothing. From a distance, it looked as though bees were swarming over honey. A short while later, there was not a shred of clothing left on the Prophet's girl's body, and the marks of the crowd's frenzy were screaming out loud on her flesh. At a distance, a group of eunuchs watched the believers' behavior. They were fewer in number and lacked the courage to speak out. Some of them kept looking toward the sky, as if waiting for a miracle. The Prophet's girl groaned in pain, crying, but no one in the crowd cared. The same people who preached about modesty for women were now celebrating her nakedness. Proudly, they recited Quranic verses and shouted, "Allahu Akbar." The violent crowd lifted her in the same condition, raining kicks and punches on her without stopping. From behind, the religious man came carrying a bucket of kerosene. which he poured over the prophet's girl. As soon as the kerosene was poured over her, the crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch. People recited Quranic verses and shouted praises, while some continued beating the prophet's girl. In the midst of this, an old man lit a matchstick and threw it at her, drenched in kerosene. As soon as the flame touched her, it set her ablaze within moments. The crowd rejoiced as they watched her burn, shouting slogans, some even continuing to beat her as she burned. Even as she lay unconscious and burned on the road, the crowd kept trampling her. Seeing the crowd gathered on the road, the police eventually arrived at the scene but, overwhelmed by the crowd's fervor and rage, did not dare intervene. The eunuchs, who had been standing on the side, watching the prophet's girl burn, began to leave one by one in despair. They had hoped that someone from above, or Allah, would come to save her, but this time, no one came to rescue her. The prophet's girl lay on the road, turning to ash. By the time her body had fully burned, the crowd began to slowly disperse. Eventually, there was nothing left where the prophet's girl had been, and soon after, the world resumed its daily routine as if nothing had happened.